Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by BeaversEdge writer and KGO radio host TJ Mathewson. We're back here with another edition of the podcast. Got a big show for you guys today. We're going to be breaking down the remainder of the BeaversEdge top 25, number 1 through 9. Going to be breaking that down in detail. We also have couple newsy items to discuss. Fall camp starting right around the corner. Lots of stuff to discuss there as well. And also going to touch on the not so great news of Colorado's impending departure from the Pac-12 as well. So lots to dive into today on the big podcast. Thanks a bunch for everyone for tuning in to check it out. TJ, what's going on, man? How are you? Looks like we got you a new background set up today.
Yeah, I know you guys like it. It's nice. It's nice to do one of these from home. A convenient work schedule today allows me to do this at my actual recording setup, which is actually kind of nice. I have real lighting, not as much background, but an actual microphone too. It's a nice balance, I like it, and it's comfortable.
Yeah, I need to maybe invest and get me a stand-up mic at home because it can be nice for sure.
Yeah, I need a better one, to be honest. If I'm going to upgrade, I want to buy like a real microphone. This is I wouldn't qualify this as a real microphone. It is, however, better than the other option than not having one. So we balance. But this is the life of a small town radio host. Is you get what you can. But we'll try as we get more along in this thing.
Absolutely. And you're just building pieces of the puzzle as you go. And again, we'll go ahead and dive right into the breaking news before we get into the BeaversEdge top 25. And TJ and I will also be talking a little bit about fall camp as the Beavers are set to start fall camp next week. We're awaiting the exact specifics on exactly when we'll be at the Pro Throw practice fields, but absolutely expect BeaversEdge to be there. TJ and I will have full coverage of DJU and Jonathan Smith and the Beavers this year as they get ready to enter the season. It's going to be exciting. Lots of awesome stuff. And also got to drop an important piece of news. The Beavers picked up a commitment last night on the recruiting trail from Rakeem Johnson, an offensive lineman out of Idaho. That brings the total recruiting class up to 12 for the Beavers in 2024. And Rakeem Johnson is now the 5th offensive line commit. Beavers definitely continuing to build the trenches with Coach Michalczek, and for a team that establishes their identity with the run game as Oregon State does, you can definitely check out all of our analysis on the recruiting class. But we can say pretty confidently, Coach Michalczek's got another great group of recruits coming in. So Oregon State continuing to build strong in the trenches, but. Let's go ahead and dive into Dion and Colorado and the Buffs. Just real quick here, TJ. We'll get the obligation out of the way. A bit of a bummer news. Can't say that I was shocked by the news. I figured after the comments we heard at Pac-12 Media Day that it was going to kind of be all quiet on the Western Front for a little while. And then this happens, and you realize that nothing like this happens instantly. This was planned and deliberately drawn out over time. So briefly, my thoughts on it. We'll see if the Pac-12 holds together with some scotch tape and glue, and maybe we just found the easiest way to an 8-game conference schedule. Beyond that, it could be interesting to see how these chips fall. The onus is going to be on George Kliavkoff to get a media rights deal in play. Like we've talked about, like it's a broken record. It's beyond too late to have had this done, but now you need to find a way to get something in place so conference doesn't just rip apart at the seams.
Colorado had been having these meetings for months and months.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I'm with you. We'd heard leaks like this for months about a potential interest in the Big 12. But this was the first time that it's actually serious. And as we're recording here on Thursday, it's going to probably be official later this afternoon when they formally apply for Big 12 membership. In a vacuum, in terms of a competition standpoint, the Pac-12 is losing nothing competition-wise because if you think about it, Colorado finished last place 4 times more than they made bowl games in Pac-12, which is just remarkable. It is. Yeah. It is honestly incredible, the efficiency that they did that in. However, leading to the stability, there is not much stability there, because as of right now recording, there has been $0 guaranteed beyond next year for TV rights for any of the Pac-12 schools. And that includes your major brands like Oregon and Washington, who each outflank every single Big 12 school there is, every single one of them. And yet those Big 12 schools have $32 million guaranteed for the next 6 years beyond next year when their new TV rights deal comes into place. So that's where we're at. There needs to be a number. There needs to be some rights and
a platform.
Hopefully we can get to a point where the Pac-12 presidents and the athletic directors and George Kliavkov can look in the mirror and realize some of the damage they have done by thinking they are arguably too good for some Big 12 schools. I mentioned this to you before we started recording. I thought this was a really good point. The Pac-12, when the Big 12 was in disarray 2 years ago and Texas and Oklahoma said they were leaving, said they were too good to have some of these Big 12 schools come join their conference. They didn't align politically. They didn't align research-wise. They didn't align academically. So that leads to, we're good. Not thinking about survivability. Not the thing we've talked about the most is the conference not thinking ahead enough.
Sure.
And this is really where it comes back and bites them. And this is sort of the Pac-12's ego coming back and slapping themselves in the face. Started by Larry Scott, enabled by many of the presidents and athletic directors who kept them in power. Some of those athletic directors and presidents still in power today. And this is what they get. This is what happens. And, my last thought on this really just delays the inevitable. Like the Pac-12 is probably going to break apart, if not this TV deal, next TV deal. I just don't think there's enough interest. But I keep saying, as my prediction with college sports, like how far away from here are we? The 30 best football programs band together and decide, you know what, we can make a lot more money on our own besides dragging Northwestern and Indiana and Iowa State and all the and Colorado and all these other smaller programs around. Why don't we just make our own, hear me out, professional league and go make way more money on our own? And that's what I think eventually happens, obviously. And this kind of just delays the inevitable. It all seems really just unnecessary.
Yeah, it's definitely, a kind of a gut punch to the Pac-12. It's kind of a gut punch to everything that, George Kliavkov said at Pac-12 Media Day last week. And, when he was asked point blank, do you expect any more deflections? And he's like, no. And, then this happens. That's definitely a bad look. And to put it really simply, TJ, it looks like you don't have your house under control. In the metaphor that everybody knows, get your house in order. His house is not in order right now. And that's where it's like, if you don't know what's going on in your own house, maybe some problems. So, I mean, there's still an opportunity to salvage what's left. And again, like TJ said, if everybody else is content for the moment, and it was just Colorado, from a competition standpoint, you're not really going to miss the Buffs. No. So, we'll see. It's not, DEFCON 0, but it's getting close, so to speak, right?
And we sit here thinking about George Kliavkov's tenure so far. When he came in to replace Larry Scott, it's like, oh, thank God.
Right.
Thank God. But here's what has happened under George Kliavkov's watch. The two LA schools gone, Colorado gone, and a year plus of negotiating a TV deal with zero results after the Big 12 jumped you in line for TV money, taking significantly less time to secure TV money, and the Pac-12 saying, we can do better on the open market. How's that working out? Not very well. And who's in charge of getting that TV deal done? It's George. He's in charge of it, and he has not delivered. I want to have confidence in a new commissioner that's not Larry Scott, but we look at the results he has produced, and it's sucked. It's been awful.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean,
that's where we're at.
It's one of those things where it's many decisions over a big window got you to this point. And it's unfortunate we're at this point, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see, how the chips fall. And, we felt like we wanted to address it on the podcast because, it's another thing that's going to impact this conference's ability to get, its media rights done. And so I keep telling people, enjoy this 2023 season, because after that, it's going to be interesting to see what happens even specifically for Oregon State. So that's a podcast and another discussion for another day. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the fall camp discussions, TJ, and then we'll get in and discuss the final bit of the Beavers Edge top 25 list. But, again, we got fall camp starting up next week. Oregon State head coach Jonathan Smith, 2023 football season, some new faces, some important position battles and whatnot. Going to be a lot of things we're going to be keeping an eye on. But TJ, I'm curious, just right off the bat, what's one thing you're going to be looking for just to open up fall camp, and what's one thing you're kind of excited for?
Excited to watch the quarterbacks. I'm curious to see, is Aiden Childs going to look better than everyone else again? It was pretty obvious in spring. He looked way better than the other two quarterbacks. His athleticism helped a lot. He's running around and throwing on the run, and half the starters are sitting out spring ball anyways. But that's not going to be a case when fall rolls around. So I just think that's kind of curious. But besides the obvious answer of quarterback, the middle linebackers that's a really important position. You lost a lot of production out of that group. And Easton Mascarenas, we assume, is going to start at one of the spots. He's gotten a lot of run filling in and on special teams as well in prior seasons. And now he's going to be trusted to jump in there and really embrace a full-time role. And then besides him, it's John Miller, we think. But there's other more unknown options there. Mason Tufaga, Micaiah Tung. Who's actually going to step in and really embrace that linebacker role? Because even if you have your two starters there who lack experience, you also have backups who also lack experience. So that's going to be an interesting group, and that's a very important part of this Trent Bray defense. And a sleeper is something that we have not mentioned enough. Kicker.
Yes.
Beavers still, Everett Hayes coming off a shaky season. And, the difference between 11-1 and 9-3 could be 2 sweeps of his leg and 2 misses in crummy November West Coast weather. So I think that's curious. He needs a good camp and he needs a good season because he did not earn much, I would say, goodwill down the stretch last season.
Yeah, it was definitely, again, all great points and areas that I definitely we're going to be keeping an eye on for sure. Inside linebackers, very, very intriguing to me. I think, like you said, Easton's got a spot locked up. I think he's going to have a really big season, but who gets that spot next to him? Is it one of those guys? Again, it looked like John Miller in the spring, but, a lot can happen since then. Expect, like TJ said, Micaiah Tung and Mason Tufaga to work into that mix as well. But yeah, going back to Everett, regardless of the injury, that he was dealing with last year when he missed a little bit of time and all that, as again, speaking as an observationist, his injury was supposedly a groin injury. I imagine a groin injury for a kicker is probably less than ideal. I'll just leave it at that. And that's probably something I don't want to say it's like a sprained ankle where you maybe never really heal until the season's over, but it's probably something that's nagging you throughout the season, even when you're starting to get back. And, the Beavers found out last year, even, their other options weren't, world beaters either, right? Atticus Sappington, I think, was a little bit more accurate when he came in, but he didn't have the distance that Everett had. So, now you enter this spring, or rather this fall, after TJ and I saw spring a little bit. You had Everett in the mix, you had Atticus in the mix again, you had Josh McCormick in the mix a little bit. But even with all that being said, TJ and I can still confidently say Everett's still their best option. He just needs to be better than he was this last year. And, some of that, was just inconsistent kicking, and I think he needs to improve. But like you said, it can be the difference between like an 11-1 campaign and a 9-3 campaign. I really don't think that's a stretch to say.
And that's the difference between arguably actually making the playoff, which I mean, like us talking about the playoff. Does that blow your mind yet, Brenden? Or, you just end up in the Alamo Bowl, right? Yeah, what would you rather have? So I think that's pretty important. And then one sneaky one, who's going to be that third wide receiver? I mean, we assume Josiah Irish, but I don't think I don't think he's really like. I don't think that's a guarantee by
Yeah,
all stretches. Like,
Jonathan.
is Zach Card gonna
Yeah,
really show out as a true freshman this
yeah. It's
season?
like
Is he gonna earn himself some serious playing time? Or are we gonna see some more veterans in that group, like Jimmy Vaslin or Jeremiah Noga or Trent Walker had a really big spring. He was Aiden Trowell's favorite target during the spring. So there's just a
right.
couple of names there that's going to be really curious who could stand out on the inside.
No, those are good names, and I'll even throw in the two JUCO guys they picked up too, and Jemai East and Jalen Holmes. Those guys, Jemai East brings some size, comes from that college at San Mateo, where the Beavers have had quite a bit of success, recently, just kind of being able to get plug and play guys. And then Jalen Holmes, a little more underrated, but dude is lightning fast. So I'm curious to see again how that works out. Based on reading between the tea leaves at or reading the tea leaves, excuse me, at Pac-12 Media Day. Jonathan kind of mentioned Josiah as that third receiver, so I'm curious to see if he's kind of has the edge there. I'm also curious to see how much the tight end position, particularly. Jack Belling showed some good moments last year. Can he take that next step? What will Jermaine Terry, the Cal transfer, who looks just like a massive, just huge target for DJU to throw the ball to? What does Riley Sharp look like? Jake Overman's there as well, and he's been, a guy of consistency for several years, more so as a blocker, but, I think could offer something there too. So even if, I guess that's kind of it with, DJ or the offense in general, expecting to pass the ball more or just doing so more efficiently, I should say. It's going to be interesting to see who the recipient of some of those targets are. And TJ mentioned it well, some of those guys who could be filling in at the third spot. Otherwise, we kind of know what's going to happen at offensive line. We'll get into it a little bit more as we finish up the Edge Top 25 to close out the podcast. The defensive line, we kind of know what to expect there too. As far as the starters go, I'm definitely looking for which young guys impress on both sides of the line, because again, particularly as mentioned earlier, Oregon State building up years and years of offensive line depth is the reason they're able to overcome graduations. Like, how many other schools could lose a player? Like, how many other schools in Oregon State's position could lose a player like Brenden Kipper and be like, yeah, the offensive line might be better. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Let's just put another all-conference player in his spot.
right. So it's like that's something that Coach Mahalchek has just got down to a T. So I'm curious to see which kind of young guys pop there. Maybe some outside, obviously the next biggest thing that the defense wants to do this year, TJ, is get a pass rush. I'm curious to see which edge rushers kind of come to the table. Do Drew Chatfield and John McCartan look like they're ready to go in their final years? Do we see Nico Taylor come into the mix after, being one of the top JUCO players this last year? Maybe Mathewson, Malachi Donaldson, who we've seen little flashes of here and there. That's the most exciting part about fall camp is sometimes some of those, battles beyond just like quarterback or whatnot, because, it's fall camps where a lot of that real competition is ironed out.
And what about that interior pass rush too? I mean, one of those stars was spring, Takari Hickel.
Right.
He was a monster inside. And we saw a little bit of pressure from Isaac Hodgins as well down there, I think, underneath as well. Like that like intriguing to see, like the real difference of an elite pass rush is generating pressure from the interior. It really just messes up the whole line. And if you can get an interior pass rush against this offensive line, I feel like you'd have to be pretty confident against the rest of the Pac-12. So that'll be interesting. I mean, this is a defensive line that dominated during spring. I mean, just dominated. And I'm curious to see how much of that's going to carry over and give people a reason to be excited.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then, like as TJ alluded to earlier, I'm very excited to see just Oregon State in general, how they carry themselves with new expectations. Like, it's one thing when we talk to the team in spring and you're several months removed from gameplay on both sides, like you're several months removed from the bowl game and several months away from playing again. But now that the expectations monster, for lack of better terms, has fully set in, and people were talking, hey, best case scenario, Oregon State could make a chase for the playoff. Best case scenario, Oregon State could, be in the Pac-12 championship. I'm very curious to see how the team carries themselves throughout fall camp. I'm curious to see how they, handle interactions with us media. I'm curious to see how competitions go. I'm curious to just kind of see all the little intricacies that we'll be able to report on for sure. And, again, seems like a prime opportunity to say, make sure to stay tuned to BeaversEdge.com, as TJ and I will be at most practices that we're allowed to be at this fall, and it's going to be exciting. What else you want to hit on fall camp-wise, TJ, before we dive in and close out the Edge Top 25? We've got number 1 through 9, the big reveal to finally finish up now. But bottom line, coming. I'm excited, folks, and it's going to be mighty fun to bring you guys coverage this year.
Are we getting a quarterback decision before game week?
My prediction is the week of the game.
I'm fully with you.
Yeah,
if not,
that's my prediction.
I honestly wouldn't be shocked if they go into the game and say they go into the San Jose State game and say they're going to play both. I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be totally shocked.
What if they say they're going to play all three?
Even better. Even better.
I can see that would be
I'm just not shocked. I mean, we're literally a season away from Sonny Dykes doing that, playing 3 quarterbacks week 1 and still takes his team to a national championship.
It's true. I mean, it does seem very Smithian to go, so yeah, they're all gonna play. They're all gonna play. But
spread 17. I think we have a little bit of leeway.
A little bit of wiggle room. But like I said, definitely make sure to stay tuned to BeaversEdge.com and keep tabs on the website and on the damn board. We'll have all the updates for you guys leading into the start of fall camp next week. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and spend the rest of the podcast wrapping up the rest of the Edge Top 25. TJ, we've had quite the journey. The honorable mentions all down to number 1, but we somehow have made it through the countdown. I feel like the entire month of July has seemingly flown by. I feel like we just were having the 4th of July, and here we are, beginning of August. But as is the case, the clock doesn't stop. But let's go ahead and dive right on into the list. When we left you guys last time, we broke down all the way down to Hanelli Bloomfield at number 10. But now we're going to go ahead and go number 9 through number 3. Starting off at number 9, defensive lineman number 9. TJ, he's our highest graded defensive lineman. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we were just talking about pass rush, and I don't think we mentioned him.
Yeah,
how dare us?
Right?
How dare us?
It's true. The guy who led the team in tackles for loss.
Yeah, and in terms of importance on the defensive line, I mean, he's got to be up there. And now this is a question of, is James Rawls going to turn those tackles for loss into some sacks? I know those numbers aren't perfect sacks or I think all that really matters is you get pressure on the quarterback in the end, and then whatever else happens after is what it is. But I think that's a really important part for James Rawls this season, staying healthy and really generating a pass rush on the outside. And that is what is going to allow this Beaver defense to take a next step is generating that pass rush. And I think everyone's going to be looking at James Rawls to be one of those guys who is like one of the top 2 or 3 contributors in terms of constantly pressuring the quarterback. He's going to be on the field more than most other guys on that defensive line. They trust him. They rely on him, and he's going to, go out there and go show it that you're going to go really give the quarterback hell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think James Rawls, I think he earns that spot as the top defensive lineman on our list. I think he's coming off a great year. He's very physical, very tough, and he's just a disruptor on that defensive line. And as you mentioned, leading the team in tackles for loss is certainly a strong point for him. And, I'm sure he'll be looking to generate a little bit more pressure. Really, really good football player and someone they're going to really be happy to have on that line this year. Coming in at number 8, wide receiver Silas Bolden, Anthony Gould's Pac-12 Media Day pick of breakout player this year. Silas kind of broke out last year. I just, looked at his numbers. He had a pretty solid season, but I think when they mean breakout, they mean, wants to push to be closer towards, that 1,000-yard mark as a receiver. It'd be quite the increase from where he was. But if the Beavers are going to, more successfully in the way we think they're going to throw the ball, there should be lots of opportunities. I think Silas Bolden definitely has that it factor. We saw flashes of it in the bowl game a little bit. Very electric with the ball in his hands, quick, great hands, can kind of contort his body lots of different ways to make really tough catches. I think it's going to be a good season for him.
and not afraid to make a catch in traffic. That's for sure.
Right.
And I think the
That's
real
true.
X factor with him, it's so crazy. The Beavers have two first team All Pac-12 returners on their team.
Right.
That's absurd. That is really
It is.
it's really something. So, like, his game breaking ability not will only be the impact he's going to make on the outside, but he can just totally flip the field in special teams, which is
Right.
really a unique aspect to have for a receiver. So, I mean, even though he's not the biggest guy in the world, this guy is not going to be afraid to go jump up and go grab a ball over a defensive back, which I think DJ might trust. I mean, that's not really Anthony Gould's game. And again, the tight end's just not totally proven in that aspect.
Sure.
But Silas has shown, like, you just throw the ball up to me, I'll go catch
he can
it.
Jump.
That's pretty important for a quarterback.
Yeah, he can definitely jump. And I'm curious, I think if I'm understanding it correctly, it seems to me like the Beavers are going to be okay still letting Anthony Gould return punts this year, because do you think we see Silas take less kickoffs this year?
Well, I think he'll just let the ball bounce and they'll just start at the 20. I think they'll always line him out, but line him up back there.
Fair. No,
just the fear factor, but all you need to do now is take a knee and you go out to the 25-yard line.
Sure, and it's been
20,
that way for
20 or 25. I get my 20 mixed up.
25, and but Silas, I believe, led the conference in kick return yards per return, or was right there near the top, and that's kind of the debate that you have with your two receivers being your two best returners. You're at a natural bigger risk of injury always returning punts or returning kicks. Punts a little bit less, but TJ, they've done that rule to eventually dissuade teams of returning because it's such an injury factor to have dudes going full speed downfield at, two locomotive type forces, right? So I do think, they could watch it, but like you said, it's just something that came to mind as I was, looking at his stats from last year is, last year they had Tyjon Lindsey, they had Trayshawn Harrison. So maybe Silas Bolden being a returner, even if he did get a little dinged up, it probably wasn't as detrimental to this year where they need both those guys to be healthy.
But they can protect that by just telling Silas not to return a kickoff. Like the one where they really need a kickoff return, they'll do it. Otherwise, it's so easy to just wave for a fair catch and start at the 25. Like that,
I agree.
That's the best way to protect them. So they'll understand where it's at.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's probably the way that they will approach it. Coming in at number 7, the quarterback. One DJ Uyunglele comes in at number 7. No, folks, he's not coming in at number 1. I know, but Oregon State DJ still got to prove a few things on the field this year, and I think Oregon State's definitely got some talented playmakers that are going to be particularly blocking for him that will be coming in at the top spot. But honestly, TJ, with where we had been, I think this spot, you maybe could have made a claim for top 5 for DJ. But this spot feels right going into the season.
I agree. I'm interested to see how DJ responds to the first couple weeks of camp. There is going to be some pressure on him because there's going to be media there watching. There's going to be people writing about him. He's the number 1 story. He came to Oregon State to take some pressure off of himself. I love the words you used in your breakdown. Pressure cooker of Clemson. And it really couldn't get any more pressure cooker like that. It's like, oh, yeah, you're replacing Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick, national champion, made it to the playoff 3 times in his college career.
And the guy before. And
by the way, you're as highly rated as him, so no pressure. You better do the exact same thing. So it's not that. But I remember we watched DJ in spring, and he was fine. He was adjusting
fine is a good
in
word.
spring. Yeah, he was adjusting in spring. What if he comes out and struggles a little bit the first 2 weeks of camp? I mean, the pressure is on because he's supposed to start, and it's not like the expectations around this program are any lighter than they are of Clemson this year. Like maybe the Beavers Vegas total might be a little bit lower, but in terms of what the fan bases expect, it's pretty similar, right? And that's on top of learning a new offense that he says he's more comfortable with, opposed to the one they were running him in Clemson. So it's going to be curious. Like, he's going to try and keep a loose mind, but what if some balls start skipping in the dirt and he's not playing as well, and Ben and Aiden come out firing in camps, 2 guys who might know the system a little bit better than him or digesting it a little bit better. That's what I'm curious to see with DJ.
Yeah,
because
chemistry is one
He's got
thing.
some stuff on. He's got some things to deal with here as camp rolls around.
Yeah, chemistry is one thing because again, he's still only working. I be surprised if we're having the conversation, him still learning the offense. I would imagine he is almost caught up to Ben and those other guys by now, just knowing everything we've heard from everyone, whether it's the guys talking about him at Pac-12 Media Day or Jonathan talking about him or whatever. It's that he's quiet, and the dude is a film junkie. He spends so much time breaking down film, working on. So I think that this summer was obviously great for him in that regard. But like you said, the pressure will be on. The difference is the pressure of Corvallis is nothing compared to the pressure of following Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence as quarterbacks.
Right.
That is
right.
a challenge. And
while having Cade Klubnik breathing down your neck.
Exactly. And it's who knows? And he was also a West Coast guy. And again, I'm just gonna say this. From someone from Southern California, imagine Clemson, South Carolina is a little different. That as far as just what you know. Him coming back to the West Coast, I'm sure he probably feels a little bit more comfortable at home. I'm not saying it's bad or anything, it's just different, right? I would feel the same way coming from where I live if I went to Clemson. It would have a getting used to period. And not to say that he wasn't there for a while, he obviously was, but I think just in numerous ways, the pressure will be off him in Corvallis, and I really do think he's going to thrive. I think what you mentioned, I think it's possible, but I think it's a low likelihood. I think he will showcase himself as being the best quarterback in time, and it'll be one of those things where we're all kind of like, when are they going to name him the guy? But our eyes haven't seen it in the spring or in the fall yet, so that's definitely something to dive into. But nevertheless, DJ comes in at number 7. We'll be excited to chit chat about him and talk to him and break him all down here in the weeks to come. Coming in number 6, the top receiver on the list, Anthony Gould, the All-American returner, coming back this year. Again, some All-American honors as a return specialist last year. Probably Oregon State's most all-around best receiver. Again, case for Silas too. But just like Silas, a lot of the same things I said. A little less springy as far as like being able to go up and make like acrobatic catches. But Anthony Gould's great with the ball in his hands, maybe the best guy on the team with the ball in his hands, zip to zip speed kind of a thing. He is elusive, hence his punt return touchdowns this last year. And I think he could easily be a 1,000-yard receiver. I don't see that as a big stretch.
Yeah, I think volume would be the only question of whether or not he gets to 1,000, but especially it's that downfield aspect and utilizing the rocket arm of DJ and what Anthony, I think, is gonna be the biggest asset on this team, and on top of all of his returning duties and flipping the field on a punt, which is very important. And he is gonna have punt returners do return almost every single punt, which is gonna be curious of how much is Jonathan gonna let his wide receiver one go out there and take a hit on a punt return. So that'll be something curious to look at. But expectations are high for Anthony Gould this year. I mean, he's, and I'm sure he'll go out there and perform. That dude, he's a baller.
Yeah, and just I love his confidence. Him at media day, he exudes confidence, and I think that's huge for a receiver room that needs a little swagger to it. So that I definitely like what I'm seeing from Anthony there. Coming in at number 5, we inside the top 5 now. We got Keaton Oladapo, the top defensive player on our countdown, and what we say is Oregon State's most important defensive player. TJ, I stand by that. This defense looks entirely different right now if Oladapo did not decide to come back. I think it's one of the biggest moves not even moves, but just biggest things that worked in their favor this offseason. He's huge.
That would have been an entire secondary to replace, and we'd be sitting here talking about how important it is of what they're replacing in the secondary. But he's the captain back there. He is the veteran leading all these other guys around him, which is going to be fascinating because he's going to have new guys to his sides and new guys in front of him at the linebacker spot as well in terms of comfortability and returners this season, which is fascinating, which makes his job all that more important in terms of being out there and leading. I mean, he's the one who's got the snaps. He's the one who's played excellent full Pac-12 seasons before. And for a kid who was a walk-on,
Yeah.
He's carved out a
Oh,
pretty
I
nice
love
role
it.
for himself.
Oh, I love it, man. Happy Valley. I'm a sucker for those guys, and anyone listening, any of those guys that, John Miller too. I definitely like those guys that are come from the local schools here. And, I love that Catano Ladapo said at Pac-12 Media Day that is, one of his Oregon State idols is Jordan Poyer, another local guy from Astoria. I mean, that's awesome to me. So again, those kind of guys are what help make Oregon State's program what it is. So you have to have those guys. And Caton's going to have a big year. He's big for that secondary in numerous ways. And last but not least of the skill position players, we arrive at Damian Martinez at number 4, coming off a big time freshman season. Lots of accolades, lots of expectations moving forward. The Beavers probably have, well, not even probably, they do. They have their next great running back in front of them. And we'll get into the three guys that'll be blocking for him and DJU to come here in the final 3 spots. Big spoiler, they're all offensive linemen. But let's get into Damian real quick, TJ. Not a lot to be said about Damian other than, he met the expectations. Took him a little bit to get going last year. Didn't really seize it until midway. But, man, once he got going, there wasn't anybody slowing him down.
He's just a freight train. I mean, we're sitting here saying expectations. Okay, so a successful season for Damian Martinez, given the expectation is first team all conference and 15 touchdowns, probably.
Yeah, and what,
right?
12?
As a clear lead running back in a crowded and talented running back room, I think that's fair for him. And I think he would agree in terms of what he expects to produce for this offense this year. A successful offense has Damian Martinez doing that.
Yeah, no, and like you said, I think Damian is going to be, I think he's going to be even better. And as TJ and I alluded to, I think the offensive line could be even better than were last year. I mean, several groups of Oregon State with like a top 10 offensive line in the country this year, maybe top 5, and there's reason why. And again, we'll announce our list of the top 3. Again, we right tackle Talise Fuaga coming in number 3, Good coming in at number 2, and left tackle Joshua Gray coming in at number 1. That's our list, but TJ and I discussed it extensively. The final 3 offensive, they feel you could make a case for one for any of them. They're a little splitting hairs because all 3 of those guys have various preseason honors. TJ, various preseason all conference honors. Jake Levengood's the most experienced of the group. Josh and Talise Fuaga probably have the most pro potential of the group. So you can kind of, parse out based on what you like most in an offensive lineman. We went with, Fuaga having 1 year of starting experience at 3, Levengood kind of being the captain of the offensive line at 2, and then Gray, who we believe is Oregon State's just overall best offensive lineman, coming in at number 1. What are your thoughts on that O-line trio at the top?
Well, it really shows you how strong your foundation is when 5 of your top 11 players on your roster are all offensive linemen. There are so many teams around the country who would beg to have one of these guys in their top 10, and Oregon State has all 5 of their offensive linemen going from 1 to 11. That's just huge. Exceptional, and just speaks to the role that Jim Michalczyk does. And they're going to be important this year, right? I mean, that's going to be the anchor of this team when you match up with some of these really elite squads, and especially ones with great defenses. That offensive line makes the difference, especially if you're going to get into a big time bowl game and you're trying to win that bowl game. That offensive line is what gives you the edge when you don't recruit at the same level along the defense that those other teams do.
No, and that's perfectly. You said it perfectly, and I go back to the beginning of the podcast when I emphasized how important it is that Jim Michalczyk continue to get wins on the recruiting trail, because he is one of the best developers of talent at the offensive line position. It's not like Oregon State's out there landing 5-star offensive linemen. These are largely guys that Coach Michalczyk has, built up, and, all these things. These guys have worked really hard and gotten to their particular spots. So definitely a point of pride for Oregon State to have the offensive line leading the way, the identity of their team. And that's why we decided to go with the offensive lineman leading the way. And that wraps up the Beavers Edge top 25 list. So big shout out to TJ for helping me create that this year. Thanks to everyone for giving your thoughts on the rankings and whatnot. We've certainly enjoyed it. Make sure to stay tuned to BeaversEdge.com. We got fall camp coming up next week. TJ and I'll be live in Corvallis. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Edge Podcast.